Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today I'm out here trying to figure out what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. You know, it's one of those things where you got a lot of stuff to do and you're not sure which thing to do next, and so that's kind of where I'm at today. But I was up late last night editing video and getting that put up for you guys. So one of the things that I like to do when I get to this point is I like to just take, you know, even just half an hour, 30 minutes, and kind of clean up, you know, clean the shop up a little bit. Just clear the top, the tables off, the workspace off. It just, you know, I'm not I'm not naturally the tidiest person. You know, I don't know if I can blame that on my artistic bent or if I'm allowed to do that or not, but you know, it's just something that it just kind of piles up a little bit, and so that just contributes to, it seems to contribute to the difficulty of like sort of focusing your brain on what it is that you're supposed to be doing right now. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to take a few minutes and just clear stuff off, throw stuff away that needs to be thrown away, try to put stuff away a little bit. That is one thing I need to do better at, is getting a place to put everything, because that's just a constant battle. But anyway, so I'm going to do that for a minute. Alright guys, I have the shop cleaned up a little bit. I can concentrate better now. So I'm going to show you how I like to make some basic, sturdy, serviceable Kydex sheaths for some knives that I make. And what you're going to need when you're working with this whole project is the knife you're making the sheath for, some heavy-duty duct tape, your Kydex or plastic material that's called Kydex because that's the name brand, just like Kleenexes, you know, that kind of thing. And then you're going to need something to press it in. I just use a couple pieces of vulcanized rubber foam, which you can get online. I'll go ahead and I'll put a link in the description because that's what you do, right? And then I just have a couple of 2x10s, I think, or 8s. I wasn't a carpenter long enough to know that. And I just use my vise. You can make or buy fancy Kydex presses, but this just does the same thing for less money. And I don't make a lot of Kydex sheaths, so it works fine for what I do. The first thing you're going to need to do is, using your duct tape, create a clearance covering on the blade and even potentially further up onto the knife. The reason you do this is because if you just take this knife or any knife and squish it between two pieces of Kydex, it's going to form fit to where it will be so tight you can't get it in and out. And of course that doesn't make a good sheath. So I use, at a bare minimum, 1 layer of duct tape, and sometimes 2, before you go ahead and mold that. You don't want to use the inexpensive thin duct tape. I like to get the good stuff. There's various good brands out there that are nice and thick. This is duct tape, but there are others like Gorilla Tape. I've used that before as well. Last thing I forgot to mention is you're going to need a heat source. What I use is a simple thrift store find, and that is just a cooking griddle that you plug into the wall outlet. The first thing you have to establish is how much Kydex you're going to use, and I have found that a general rule of thumb is 3 inches per side. So if I have a average knife with an average thickness of about 3/4 of an inch, somewhere in there, and about 1 inch to 1.25 inches wide, I find that 3 inches wide for the sheath is adequate. It leaves you a little bit to trim off and finish the edge, and of course install your eyelets to hold the whole thing together. Probably the simplest method I've found for cutting this is to use a scribe, a sturdy scribe, to score the material heavily and then simply snap it in half. That works well, and as long as you're careful, it's very simple to get a good clean line, and you just snap in half like so. Sometimes I'll leave that attached, go ahead and fold it over, and you have a straight edge right there already. And there you have it. 2 3-inch pieces, the correct length for your knife, and that depends on how far up the handle you want it to go. Those are ready to heat up, and squish around the knife. Alright, so this is your standard thrift store find pancake griddle, and I turn mine up to 325 in that range, 300, 325. You don't want to go much more than that or you're going to ruin your Kydex. Just throw it on there and make sure that you put the smooth side down. If you put the textured or hair side down, it's sort of imitation leather grain, so call it the hair side, then it's going to melt it and ruin it. So you always want to make sure the smooth side is applied to the heat, in this particular method especially. Now you'll notice as soon as you put your Kydex on the heat source or on the griddle, it's going to sort of curl up a little bit. And how do you know when it's ready? Well, one indicator is that it lays completely flat on the surface of the griddle. It hasn't continued to curl up. You don't want to overheat it or heat it for too long, but you can check it by sort of checking the edges, and like right now the middle's pretty soft, but the edges really haven't come down and received that heat as much as they need to. They're too hard yet. So it's kind of a by feel thing in my experience, but once they're laying flat and are completely relaxed on the surface of the griddle, that's one good indicator that they're at the temperature you need before you go and press them. So we're just waiting on the Kydex to heat up sufficiently. Sometimes I like to press it down on the griddle a little bit, make sure it's contacting effectively. The edges will sometimes get hotter and hold the rest of it up, so just kind of keep an eye on that. But I think we're about ready. Okay, so you can see how the Kydex has molded completely to the shape of the knife, and we have enough room to install our eyelets. At this point it's still quite plastic, quite soft. You need to let it cool off before you really do much with it. Once the Kydex is cooled down and it's stiff again, you're ready to go ahead and drill the holes for your fastening system. I like to use anodized brass eyelets, and there's any number of different bolts or eyelets you can use. These ones happen to be 1/4 inch in diameter on the outside, and that's the size of holes that we need to drill in the Kydex sheath. Rivet placement is important in this case for two reasons. One, you can't have a rivet or eyelet up too far, or it's going to keep these two pieces pinched together so much that you're not going to be able to get the knife in and out. And that also is affected by how much you open this up, but we'll get to that in a minute. Another thing that's important is how you're going to fasten it to your belt or your pack or whatever. I use a lot of tech locks, and for the ones I use, the hole spacing requirement is 3/4 inches on center. So what I normally do is I'll run 3 to 4 eyelets on each side, 3/4 on center, and then several down in the point area of the sheath just to keep things secure, and add additional lashing or tether points if needed. You'll notice I have not removed the knife yet from the sheath, and I found it's a lot easier to leave it in there. The edges of the Kydex get stuck together a little bit, and it kind of holds it together. If you take it apart, you have to be able to put it back together exactly the same way before you drill the holes, otherwise they're going to be off and the knife isn't going to fit. So I found this just works the easiest and the best. I have two different tools here. The first is a eyelet flaring tool that you can get to go with the eyelets. The second is actually a punch with the end ground off, and the reason is I found it's much easier, much more effective to start the flare on the eyelet with something like this and then switch to the finishing tool. If you use this right out of the gate, I've found it's very difficult to get those eyelets to flare out and curl over nicely and cleanly. A heat gun would be good, but you can use just a lighter. In my experience, this is going to be your most difficult area to get the sheath to fit, and that is where the handle scales will come down and contact the sheath, and it needs to be able to get past the opening of the sheath. So it's not a bad idea to wrap this section of the handle and duct tape as well. There's different ways of doing it. I prefer to just open up the throat a little bit after making the sheath, but you can do it a couple different ways. So the main thing is that this has to come in and out, and it comes out nicely. It just needs to go down and in there easily as well. So it's getting there, and there's a little bit of wearing, but just getting that to come in and out with the amount of ease that you want, coupled with the amount of retention you want. I should point out that there is another very effective way for adjusting the tension on your sheath, and that is, instead of putting an eyelet in at least this particular spot, you can go ahead and put a rubber washer and a Chicago screw that you can screw down and pinch these together a specific amount, and that really helps you regulate the distance between these two pieces and how much tension there is on the sheath. So keep that in mind as well. That's an additional piece to the project, but it's a good option. Once you're satisfied with the retention on the sheath and the clearance for the sheath, the next step is to create the profile, cut that off, clean it up, sand up the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and use the tin snips, take it over to the grinder, rough that out, and then finish it up by hand sanding. I went ahead and installed the rubber washer that I was talking about for the tension or the retention adjustment. Something that actually comes with the Tech-Lock system here, so I just borrowed it off of that, and that allows you to tighten this screw down as much as you want and affect the retention on the sheath. Also keep in mind that once you install the Tech-Lock and tighten those screws down, that can affect the tension or retention of the sheath as well. So sometimes it's better to have the screws or the eyelets a little bit further away from the blade. I like to keep it as slim as possible, but there is a limitation there with that, so just keep that in mind. But that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. This is a basic, sturdy, impervious to weather Kydex sheath. I like the Tech-Lock on them a lot. A lot of guys do. You can also lash it to a pack or your molly gear, what have you. But that's how I do it. Hey guys, appreciate your support in the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notifications button. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a great day.